The most reassuring thing anyone says right now in an honest conversation about AI and work sounds something like this: it can't do my whole job. And this is probably true. Most jobs are too contextual, too entangled with relationships and institutional memory and accumulated judgment for any current system to simply absorb them whole. When economists actually measure AI exposure, they measure it at the level of tasks, pieces of work that can be accelerated or partially handed off, not at the level of entire careers erased overnight. This is also where most serious research tends to look first, not at the job title, but at the tasks underneath it. So the reassurance holds too, except it may not be holding for the reason people think it is, because a job doesn't have to disappear for the deal inside it to change. Part of what makes this difficult to see is that job is the wrong unit of analysis to begin with. A job title is a shorthand, a name given to a particular bundle of tasks, expectations, responsibilities, learning pathways, and value signals that are always shifting at different rates beneath the surface. When we ask, will AI take my job? We're treating that bundle as though it were a solid object with clear edges, the kind of thing that either exists or doesn't. But that is not how jobs actually work, and it's not how AI is moving through them. What AI tends to change first, and most readily, is the underlying composition of that bundle. The expectations around what counts as a reasonable amount of work in a day. The price signals for what different parts of the work are worth. The structure by which people build their way into more serious roles. The degree of which work is legible, comparable, and controllable from the outside. None of these changes announce themselves in a job title. They happen beneath the surface of the role, while the name stays exactly the same. There are at least 6 distinct ways this is happening right now. What's interesting is that they initially appear to be separate phenomena, discrete changes in different corners of work. The further you follow them, the more you start tracing the outline of a single pattern. This video won't tell you which jobs AI will replace. That's not the question. The question is what AI changes inside the jobs that remain. And 6 patterns, in particular, are already visible enough to change the question. Let's start with the one that looks like good news. AI makes certain kinds of work faster. A first draft that used to take most of a morning arrives in a fraction of the time. And when there used to be one version of something, there can now be 5. Any reasonable person looks at this and thinks, so now there's more time. What tends to happen instead is something slightly different. In organizations, when capacity increases, the question that gets asked first is rarely, how do we protect everyone's time? It's more often, so now we can do more. Large-scale surveys from 2025 found that most senior leaders plan to use AI specifically to expand what their teams could produce, not to reduce how much was being asked of them. When AI tools raised output per hour in customer service studies, the productivity gain didn't convert into slack. It converted into a higher expectation of what a normal day looked like. And the language in which this actually arrives is never dramatic. Nobody announces it. The manager doesn't say, AI replaced you. He says, can we get 5 versions by tomorrow? Or, with AI, shouldn't this be faster now? This is the mechanism that's easy to miss. Speed. Rather than becoming an advantage that someone holds, becomes the minimum the system requires. The person who adopted the tool early isn't pulling ahead, they're running faster to stay level. And the person who hasn't yet adopted it isn't maintaining their old baseline. They're now simply running slower than the expectation. Once the first version of something can be produced quickly, the way the entire process gets valued starts to shift. And the mechanism here is more psychological than economic. There's something specific that happens when a client, a manager, or a market encounters a polished draft that was assembled in hours rather than days. The explicit reasoning rarely surfaces, but the instinct is legible enough. If that part was fast, what exactly is the rest of this worth? Behavioral research has documented this directly. In control studies, participants consistently offered lower compensation to workers who disclosed AI assistance, even when the quality of the output was held exactly equal. The work was the same, the perceived deservingness of being paid for it was lower. The problem this creates is structural. The parts of the process that genuinely remain human, contextual judgment, relationship-dependent decision-making, the kind of taste that comes from years of caring about a domain, are also the parts least visible in a finished output. They leave no trace in the document. So when the visible part becomes cheap to produce, the cost of the invisible part becomes a negotiation. And that negotiation is increasingly running in one direction. Online labor marketing research, tracking text-heavy and code-adjacent work after 2023 found the same signature: falling demand, intensifying competition, and the remaining work skewing toward the harder, less substitutable end. The bottom of the market grew, the price of occupying it fell. When generating something becomes fast, deciding whether it's actually any good doesn't become proportionally faster with it. One large field study of knowledge workers with integrated AI tools found significant time savings on writing-heavy tasks, emails, certain documentation, summarization, while their overall coordination and decision-making load barely moved. The specific tasks that could be automated did get faster. The work of figuring out whether the faster output was trustworthy, contextually appropriate, and aligned with what the organization actually needed, that remained, and in some environments grew. In precision-dependent work, the relationship is already explicit. Courts in early 2026 are handling cases involving AI-generated legal documents where fabricated citations made it through review or didn't make it through in time. Engineering research notes that context checking and error catching have emerged as significant constraints on AI adoption in technical environments where the volume of generation scales more easily than the capacity for human verification. Someone still has to sign off. Someone still carries the liability if the thing that got signed off turns out to be wrong. What this means in practice is that when AI makes creation cheap, what becomes expensive is trust, the verification work, the accountability, the responsibility that belongs to whoever's name is on the thing. There's a structural problem here that takes longer to notice, and longer still to name clearly. Many of the tasks that AI handles most capably, first drafts, routine research, standard templates, structured summaries, are also the tasks through which people in early career positions have historically learned their craft. Not because those tasks are intellectually rich in themselves, they usually aren't, but doing them repeatedly in a real organizational context, under the implicit guidance of more experienced colleagues who could correct the work and explain why. That's how someone built the foundation for doing something harder later. The unromantic work taught the structure of the domain. Early signals point in the same direction. The senior role holds more steadily than the path into it. Payroll data from AI-exposed sectors found measurable employment drops, specifically among workers in their early 20s, while positions requiring more accumulated experience weathered the change considerably better. A clear pattern begins to emerge. The ladder doesn't disappear, it gets thinner in the middle, in exactly the place where AI is most capable. AI doesn't only change what work produces, it changes how work can be seen by the people managing it. When tasks run through shared tools and processes become standardized, the work becomes more legible to management than it ever was when it lived inside someone's head or in an unstructured email thread. Who did what? How long it took? Whether the process could become a template? These questions become easier to ask and easier to answer with data. Research from the European Parliament found that over 40% of EU employees already work under some form of algorithmically managed conditions, systems that assign, pace, or evaluate work with varying degrees of human involvement. And this logic is starting to appear in company policy as well. Before new headcount is approved, teams are increasingly expected to explain why the work cannot be organized around AI first. That's a governance shift, not just a productivity experiment. The effect is more gradual than dramatic. Work that used to move on implicit trust, the belief that you knew what you were doing, and the invisible parts of your process were worth what they cost, starts to require justification instead. This is the one that cuts deepest and the least discussed. Many people locate their professional identity in something specific, being the person who writes well, who works fast, who finds what others can't, who produces a particular kind of output with a particular quality. This sense of professional distinctiveness isn't trivial. It shapes how people understand their own usefulness, not just in financial terms, but in terms of what they bring to a team, a project, a field. Being good at something that others find hard is one of the quieter anchors of professional self-regard. AI may not remove someone from their role, but it can turn what made them valuable into something everyone is expected to do. The capability that sets someone apart becomes the capability that anyone can approximate. The job title stays exactly the same, but what was the answer to why you specifically becomes a harder question. The research on what AI can't readily handle tends to converge on similar ground. Judgment that requires accountability, contextual reading built on years inside a specific domain, taste that comes from genuinely caring about the quality of a thing. These capabilities don't disappear from the job, but they become harder to see. They do not announce themselves in a polished first draft. They show up in what gets rejected, what gets questioned, what gets slowed down, what gets protected, and what someone is willing to put their name behind. So the professional identity has to move away from simply being the person who produces the visible thing and toward the person who can understand what the visible thing is worth. When you look at these 6 patterns together, something becomes clear that wasn't visible at the level of any individual item. They're not a random assortment of AI impacts. They're different phases of the same underlying shift, a quiet redistribution of what costs what, who carries risk, where learning happens, how work is controlled, and where professional value is actually located. The person who thought speed was their advantage finds that speed has become the expectation. The person whose value was in the visible output has to locate their worth somewhere that doesn't show up in the first draft. The junior employee trying to build a foundation finds the usual path thinner than it was for the people who came before them. The professional, whose work used to be trusted, now finds more of it flowing through systems that can measure it, compare it, and eventually reorganize it. And underneath all of it, the question shifts from, am I good at what I do, to something harder. What does it mean to be good at this anymore? And how would anyone be able to tell? None of this requires a dramatic announcement. The title stays. The business card still reads the same thing. What changes is the deal beneath the surface of the role. The set of expectations, economic signals, learning structures, control systems, and value questions that the role was always quietly built on. At the beginning of this, someone said, AI can't do my whole job. Sitting here at the end, the sentence lands a little differently. Because the more pressing question probably isn't whether AI can absorb the entire role. It's what's changing inside the role while the title stays the same. Which part of the work is becoming faster? And is that speed already the expectation? Which part is becoming cheaper for someone else to compare against? And which part still requires a human being to stand behind it? Your job doesn't have to disappear for the work to change. The title survives. The bargain shifts beneath it.